Welcome back, Produce Family. I am Maddie Fisher, and I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's magical guides. It is John Papp and Patrick Kelly, and they are taking us on a captivating journey through the history of fresh produce, seen in some of the most iconic Disney movies. So grab your popcorn and get comfortable, because our hosts are ready to unravel the enchanting mysteries behind fresh produce.
Thank you, Maddie.
That was quite the introduction. I hope we can live up to that. That is good.
This is why we have her. Like this is like the best thing ever. But all right, Maddie, we appreciate you. We're gonna drop you to the green room, and we appreciate you as always.
Bye.
Wow. So
That's man. Wow is definitely
I'm speechless. I'm
right.
speechless.
Good
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Patrick. Here we are for the first live stream of 2024. Exciting. Are you excited, Patrick?
Listen, when you talk about Disney, I'm always excited. Always.
How can you not be? It's like Maddie said, it's magical.
Listen,
well, hopefully we're not going to take away too much of the magic tonight, but you know, when you have to delve into history, there's always a little bit of magic taken out.
I think so,
but it's okay. I think we'll still keep it magical in different ways.
I think that the movies that we're going to cover are definitely part of history, and they're all around fun. So I would say whether you like Disney or not, whether you like where it's gone from past to future, drop all that out of your mind, because we're here to talk a little bit about fresh produce in the Disney world, right? Is it magic or reality, fact or fiction? Because these two produce guys, we're about to unravel it all, right, John?
Oh yeah, it's. I think you're gonna have a new appreciation when you watch these movies. It's kind of one of those things where you've seen something and you didn't see it before, and then you just can't stop seeing it anymore when you rewatch the movie. I think you're gonna walk away with that tonight, unfortunately.
It's like the Little Mermaid in the castle. I'm not gonna tell you what's in the castle of the Little Mermaid, but once you see what's in the castle of that Little Mermaid on the cover, you'll never unsee it. And I'm not even gonna tell you what it is.
So that's news to me.
Oh my gosh. There's like hidden gems in all of the Disney movies. You just got to figure it out. But one thing I do want to point out, everyone, is that Maddie did introduce us, but today, or I should say this evening, I'm gonna say my name is Crunk. So that's how we're gonna start the episode right here. Right. What do you say, Jafar?
Ooh, I did not I did not prepare my Jafar voice. You did not warn me that I was going to be acting tonight.
Well, listen, improv is the best way to go, buddy.
Well, before we delve into the magical world of Disney, for all our listeners here, thank you again for being here. If you are here, chances are you're loyal listeners. We appreciate you very much. And we're just going to do a quick rundown of episodes that we've released recently and what's coming up. So you will have heard, hopefully by this point, parts 1 and 2 of our series, our 4-part series on the stolen lands of Hawaii, which has been a lot of fun to uncover and understand that really, I would say, not very often told history. And in the coming weeks, you're going to get parts 3 and 4. So stay tuned for that. And soon after that series ends, we are going to do some one-off episodes, one of them being Seed to Plate. And that was with Indigenous Americans and their basically evolution of their foods from pre-contact all the way to today. It's a lot of history. We covered all in one episode. It's probably something we're going to come back to again down the road and go into more detail, but it'll set the stage nicely to get a general lay of the land. So that's a little bit of what's coming down the pipe.
We've got some fun things for sure. And, with the first live stream, we had to make it somewhat fun. Before we get started, we do have a couple people already on, and it's so funny because, Jahoon went in and said, Maddie makes it sound so much better than either of you doing the intro.
I will not argue with that.
I will not argue with that as well. Agree. But listen, that's why we have Maddie. She makes us look good. And I always say this, behind every man is a better woman. Okay. So let's just leave it at that. A couple other comments that I see. Someone did say, a LinkedIn user said, you guys should have dressed up in Disney costumes for the event. Yes, we should have.
Maybe next.
Right? We should have, but coulda, woulda, should have at this point. Okay. And shout out Amanda Rose on LinkedIn already saying, hey guys, so appreciate you being here. We've got a few people still joining on, but we're going to go ahead and get started because we got a lot to cover and we don't even know if you're ready for it. So John, what do you say? You want to start off with the first one and I'll get into it?
Let's dive into it.
Let's do it.
To give people the lay of the land tonight, we're going to highlight four different movies because there's no way we can go through all the Disney movies. We kind of pick kind of our favorites as well as some of the more popular ones that we would have heard in, I guess, our childhood at least. So four movies, and we're going to delve into those and see how accurate they are from a fresh produce perspective. So the first one, which you might have just caught a glimpse of,
that was my B,
is Beauty and the Beast.
It is Beauty.
And who doesn't love Beauty and the Beast?
And the Beast. And just to let everybody know, that's one of Maddie's favorites. I think it's one of all of our favorites. So everyone, please be our guest tonight. Okay, be our guest. Well, here we go. So as you think about Beauty and the Beast, let's go ahead and get the background on this, right? Get the history, right, John? So, based on the version of the French novelist Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont in 1756 in Magazine des Enfants, the children's collection, original fairy tale was written by the French novelist Gabrielle Suzanne Barbet de Villeneuve. And she published this in 1740 in La Jeune Américaine et les Contes. Woo! You like that? Marines, the Young American and Marine Tales. So where was this published? The Alsace region in France, if I'm saying that correct, everyone. I apologize. We learn and research some of these, so we don't have the best pronunciations. When was it? 18th century. So you figure the pre-French Revolution. And we wanted you to know this history. Why? Because when we start to think about some of the fruits and veggies or plates that are in it, is it fact? Is it fiction? Is it even reality, right? Were these plates or dishes even around back then, right, John? That's one of the things that's very, very key. So in 18th century France, it enjoyed a climate of growing prosperity, fueled by a sustained rise in population, better preventative medicine, a decline in infant mortality, and the near disappearance of widespread famine after 1709. Now, the French cuisine is already a century into developing and refining its culinary technique and style. Now we get into agriculture. So, modest improvements in farming techniques and the introduction of new crops as maize, also known as corn, which we covered in one of our episodes, and potatoes allowed French farms to feed the country's growing population. Now, the increased number of peasants led to further subdivision of land and greater competition for leases. The economic benefits of agricultural growth went mostly to landlords and the small minority of prosperous peasants. Ooh, okay. I've started to notice that land, right, and farming all together go with power, John.
Oh, yeah. And this sets the stage very importantly, right? So this is pre-French Revolution. So you have this period of enormous growth of France. I mean, France is the power in Europe at this point in time. And the peasantry class in particular, like you just said, was really booming because of the medicine and the decline in the famine. And so and this will set the stage nicely, actually, for a future episode that we're going to do during the Napoleonic era after the French Revolution and how that drastically changed agriculture. So back to Beauty and the Beast, though, this is the era that the movies sort of set in. You know, Disney's never completely committed to a specific location or a specific time. It takes pieces of, I would say, like a window in time, a kind of a big window, but it's generally in this window. And then, like you said, this helps us to better understand, okay, are what we're seeing in this video, again, with fresh produce, accurate, or is it completely from another period that shouldn't be there in the first place? So I think the first scene is when Belle's in the town, right? The beginning.
You're 100% right. So as we look at this is in the town, right? So in this little town, Belle sings of her poor provincial town as she dances through the bustling market, if you remember. Rustic, simple food in town, highlighting the pre-revolution class. And if you remember, as we show in this picture right here, they're carrying around pumpkins. John?
Yep, that's one of the ones that we see. And pumpkins is actually not from Europe, but the first explorers did actually bring pumpkins home with them to Europe, and that was around the mid 1500s. So pumpkins were actually being cultivated in England and France during probably this time around the 18th century in this case, like we were saying. And actually was in the 17th century that there was this French chef, Francois Pierre Lavergne, who actually was credited with developing the first recipe for a pompion tart. So that's pumpkin tort around 1650. So figure about 100 years before the setting of Beauty and the Beast. And that was basically the precursor to pumpkin pie. So this is pretty accurate.
I think, I mean, which that's what I love about it. So when you think about some of these things, you're like, wait a minute. Were there pumpkins there? And even some of as she stepped out the door, if you remember, I would say her house had a small little farm right as she opened up the gate. We couldn't get a glimpse of that, but let's keep moving forward because apple orchards, let's go talk about apples too. So apple orchards existed and, have existed in Normandy, which brought us to later in the film. And you might have remembered that Belle, when she was taken or kept captive at the castle, right? She then had what? There was
some pies.
Apple pie, or was it pumpkin kind of pie or blueberry pie? So since so apple orchards have existed in Normandy since at least the 8th century. Apples were probably the most accessible fruit in the medieval Europe. Mm-hmm. Every culinary manuscript contains a large percentage of apple-based recipes. Okay, and then even grapes. Grapes had been in France for centuries. French wine originated in the 6th century BC, but the use of table grapes became more popular in the early 1500s by French King Francois. So think about it. Is that fact or fiction, the pie that Belle had at the Beast's kingdom? What would you say?
I mean, so far this is all pretty in line with reality of the period that we expect Beauty and the Beast to be in and the crops that we're seeing in the movie. And actually a good comment or observation here as well. So that scene in that picture is during the Be Our Guest, the big number. And that is obviously in Beast Castle. And during this period as well. So this is also a period where, just before this period, I would say, is when the Grand Haute Cuisine of France was established. This is when the French cuisine really came to birth. And within that period, you have these aristocrats that are basically associating gluttony with courtly lifestyle. If you're overeating and you're having these huge parties, you are legendary. You are showing off your nobility. And that's pretty much exactly what you see in the Be Our Guest scene, is this over the top food and entertainment. And that is so in line with the environment of French cuisine in that period. So that was also spot on.
So I think it's pretty cool. Like you said, meals were the kingly affairs, both in quantity and quality. So some of the things that you see in Beauty and the Beast were pretty accurate. Now, as we're going to start wrapping up Beauty and the Beast, we want to show one more that's going to obviously bring attention to, because if you remember, John, when they were at the table, the Beast goes ahead and serves soup.
Yep.
And
that was a few times actually, right? There's a few
true,
scenes as he gentles up. They're constantly coming back to a scene where he's getting a little more refined and eating his soup.
Remember the first one? He was like slurping it and gouging it down at the first part of it, and
like
then
my kids do.
And then
They're all little
it
beasts.
turned into a little more elegant, because he was a prince. Remember, if you think about that, he was a prince. He just was a beast for so long. So Belle and the Beast enjoying soup. Soups were a common dish both in the royal courts and in the peasants' dining rooms. So they are filled with water, herbs, root vegetables such as radishes, carrots, turnips, and leeks, and they were cooked all day. So in the evening, the people would bring their earthenware or wooden bowls to be filled with stock and enjoyed a fresh cup of soup. So I would say if we were to look at the entire, Beauty and the Beast, I would say that it's fact. I would say it's very fact to the days, and the movie holds pretty prominent to saying, I go ahead and say great job on Disney for this one, that they did a great job in correlating the fruits and vegetables of this time period mixed in with the movie. What would you say, John?
No, absolutely. And not only the fruit and vegetables that they captured, but also just the environment as well. It's like we were saying about the dining experiences is also captured. So definitely, I would say if we're rating fact fiction here, this is definitely on the side of fact.
I
So,
definitely
good job, Beauty and the Beast.
I agree. Good job, Beauty and the Beast, and even the next one. Now, before we get started on the next one, this is one of yours. Mine's coming up next. That relates to.
Yes, the next one coming up is my
name.
childhood favorite. Yes, actually, yes. So my name is what's inspired by this next one. So, and I think this one is probably one of the most interesting, in my opinion, just because of the vast array of history in it. So, Aladdin, also I think up there with the Disney classics. So, Aladdin is really interesting because it's based off of one of the best known tales in the collection of 1001 Nights. And I think a lot of us would recognize that as the Arabian Nights.
I was just about
right?
to say Arabian Day.
Right. And they sing it in the movie, right? So they're doing an exact announcement of where this story is coming from, the Arabian Nights. Now, despite it not being part of the original text of the collection of the Arabian Nights, it was actually added by a Frenchman, Antoine Guyend, on the basis of a folk tale that he had heard from a Maronite storyteller in the city of Aleppo. So this was actually added after the fact of the collection of the Arabian Nights, but still remains one of the most popular ones. Now, if we look and kind of try to figure out what period this movie's in, it gets a little complicated. So before I get into why, I'll tell you what we think and what most experts think this is set in. So they figure that this is taking place in Baghdad during the Abbasid Empire. And the Abbasid Empire was around the 800s, so 800 AD. Now, the Abbasid Empire was basically this big Islamic empire that emerged after the fall of the classical empire. So the Romans are gone, the Persians are gone, and the Islamic empire fills that void. And there's a lot of elements and settings that are reflected from the golden age of this period in the movie. So if we recall, there's a fictitious city that this all happens in, which is called Agrabah. And now there's a lot of similarities between Agrabah and Baghdad during the Abbasid rule. So you have the architecture and city layouts that are quite similar to Baghdad during this period. But there's also an element of the cultural and geographical period of it that goes back to Morocco and India. So there's the Red City of Morocco, nicknamed for Marrakesh. And if you look at pictures of Marrakesh today, it's a lot of earthy colors, flat roofed structures, and you see a lot of that in the Aladdin city of Agrabah. In addition, Agra, which you hear in Agrabah, is actually a city in India that houses the Taj Mahal.
Ah.
So think about the palace in Aladdin. Looks awfully similar to the Taj Mahal. I think we all probably are familiar with the Taj Mahal. So if you just look at those two castles side by side, well, Taj Mahal is not a castle, but those two buildings side by side, very similar. So basically what you have in Agrabah is a blend of the people of Baghdad with the architecture and clothing in Morocco and India. So
All right.
that's kind of the background of the city. Now, what's going on with the agriculture? And the agriculture is actually fascinating during the Abbasid
There's a
Empire.
lot.
There's a lot. So during the Abbasid time, the development of agriculture was just off the charts. So again, Baghdad, basically in the middle of a desert to a degree. There was very limited avenues of water intake. So they had to convert this land into something that could produce food. And they did that. And they developed this through sophisticated systems of irrigation. And so within about 100 years of Baghdad, the surrounding just became this garden like environment, and they were able to grow a number of crops. So the staple crops during that period of the Abbasid region or the Abbasid empire was barley, rice, wheat, dates, cotton, sesame, flax. And they also did lots of fruit, and fruit was actually seen more as a science. They're trying to figure out what they could grow, what they couldn't do. And this whole period became just an agricultural revolution. And like I touched on, was irrigation was drastically improved at this point. They adopted scientific approaches to farming. So kind of how we have the zones of where you can grow things today and all that. So that's where this was established. They came up with farming manuals that were producing in every corner of the Muslim world, detailing where, when, and how to plant these various crops. There was rules on land ownership and labor rights, and so there's the introduction of the whole sharecropping, which gave big incentives to engage in agriculture, of course. And then there were just a lot of new crops that were introduced in this very region that ended up actually getting exported everywhere, especially into Europe. So this
Crazy.
is this is the environment that this movie appears to be set in. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding
Excuse
of
me.
Aladdin and the historical context of that period of what we're looking at. So
Wait.
if we look at the first scene, which is the perfect scene if you're trying to look at fresh produce, is the marketplace.
Yep.
And if you all recall, so Jasmine is sneaking out of the castle because she's sick of being suffocated by the walls of her palace, and she climbs over the wall. I know, hard life, and she strolls into this bustling marketplace, and she's just remember, so she's been in it's implied that she's been just inside palace walls all her life, so she sees all this stuff and is just completely taken aback. And what do we see?
Yep.
So the first thing here you see are dates,
which we know are very true to that area too.
Exactly.
Desert, right? Even in the movie, if you see like the palms, there were a lot of palms in the movie as well. So that's also, which when you see that, there's many things that you saw, right? There was watermelons, there was apples, but sugar dates, pistachios, but the date was a crucial crop, right? Dates were one of the main dietary and staple for much of the population. Am I right, John?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were everywhere. They were everywhere. One of the staples.
And they were eaten, right? Dates were not only eaten plain, but they were used in, producing a strong type of vinegar as well as various beverages. So, when she goes into the marketplace and as you notice, like in the movie, they're selling, they're street hustlers, just like in some of the wholesale markepalaces.
I was going to say, this is like New York in the early 1900s.
I mean, Paul Manfred might have peppers in this market. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, he has a stand in there.
Oh, don't even get me started.
But in addition to dates, there's another captured moment in this same scene with Abu, the monkey, right? So he's always trying to get food, that monkey. And
The
one
monkey's
of the things,
listen, the monkey's always
oh,
trying to get something.
I
So
can't blame him. You know, there's all
let's
this
pull that
excess.
one up.
So
we go.
here, you're gonna see that melons. So he's picking up a watermelon, and according to a Persian philosopher and historian, very recognized during this period, documents specifically that melons and watermelons were very popular in Iraqi markets. So this is spot on again. And not only were they popular in Iraqi markets, but they were cultivated widely in this area. There was at least 8 different varieties of them in this region. So that again is spot on. And then within the same scene again, we have another moment, which I'm sure a lot of us will remember as well, where Jasmine gets
very
close.
important moment here too. If you remember, this kind of started kind of the whole first chase scene. Remember?
Yes,
because
yep.
this is when it became the street rat song. Remember? That was always.
I think that came before.
Was
this
it?
Yeah, that was before.
Well,
Because
all right. Listen. Haven't watched in a while.
He didn't have Jasmine with him. But
okay, you're right.
This was a close call for Jasmine because she almost lost her hand.
That's right. That's
literally. And that's because she wanted to give this kid an apple. And again, she doesn't know any better. She just figures you can just take and give. So she gives the kid an apple. But we're apples in this region.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy.
Oh, he knows what's up.
He's pissed. He's like, "How dare you take my apple? How dare you?" And that's
remember though, apples, yes, they were grown in this region at this time, but still fruit were still a more of an experimental scientific kind of trial and experience. So apples, again, I don't quote me on this as necessarily, but based on those comments of how fruit was being grown, apples might have been not overly common. So the fact that you have this woman grabbing potentially a less in supply product that might be in higher demand, this guy has a reason to look like that. A little suspicious.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's sitting there going, "Wait a minute, what's going on here?" I mean, and again, being from the castle, she would just grab anything she wanted and hand to anybody. So to her, these were all for the taking. She wasn't realizing that she had to pay for these items.
Right. Now, what would be question is, I wonder if she had all these different fruits and vegetables in her castle that we just saw. I don't know, because she does seem to look at some of them with amazement. So who knows? That we'll have to leave for another thing. But the apple does make another appearance later in the movie, if our listeners remember, with with Jafar forcing Jasmine to feed him an apple. And Jafar gets a little bit of a bad rap, so this is not necessarily completely fresh produce related, but I think it's an important comment to make in defense of Jafar in this movie. So Jafar comes off as this like really evil, sinister, power hungry kind of guy, but Jafar, the character in Aladdin, is actually loosely based on a real life Jafar, and he was an Abbasid vizier. So vizier is like what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like this advisor to the ruler or the king or the sultan. Okay, so this is a trusted guy, the kind of the right hand sort of guy, and Jafar, the real Jafar, he had a reputation as a patron of the sciences. This guy was highly educated and really was fascinated with advancing technology. And he actually introduced Indian science into Baghdad during the Abbasid Empire. And he was actually even credited with convincing the caliph, which is basically the ruler of that region, to open a paper mill in Baghdad.
Wow.
And he even took the secret of paper making from Chinese prisoners in one of the battles that the Abbasids were having. So this guy, he was not evil. Now,
how can we be mad at this guy? He was an entrepreneur. He would listen.
Now, I think I know where his where they kind of grab this in the movie is Jafar ends up getting executed by the caliph, And the reason for that is because it's assumed he had an affair with the princess, and the princess
Oh,
was the sister of the caliph.
they left that
So,
out. They left that part out
so
in
that
the in the
there's the
Disney
tie in
story.
Aladdin, of course, because Jafar is trying to take Jasmine. Now Jasmine's not the sister of the Sultan in the movie; she's the daughter. But so there's a little bit of
Ah.
a thing in there. So
They changed it up just a little bit.
a little bit. I mean, you got to have a villain. So
I'm just saying. I mean, the guy again. Guy trying to come up in the world like your Jafar over there. We gotta talk about Jafar over here. Coming
yeah,
up,
Jafar's not
got
such a bad.
himself from rags to riches. He's next to the Sultan.
Yeah,
Just trying to make it. Trying to find that one jewel, right? In the cave. So I think if you were to look at the time period as well, I think that it was fact. I think that it was pretty spot on to what we saw in the movie and what was over in that time period in the Middle East.
yeah, no, I agree. I think most of it, a majority of it was definitely. One picture we didn't bring up, but I actually posted earlier today. There was a picture of Abu looking at a big plate of fruit, and there was actually a big error in that one. They
Oh,
had
I
a
saw that it
huge,
had like pineapples
huge
and
pineapple on the plate, and
I'm
that
wondering if I
that
have
was
that still. Let me see.
nowhere near the era.
I'm gonna
Nowhere
try
near
and see
either.
if we have that still. I
Because
do
the
know.
pineapple is indigenous to the Americas, so
There's
by
no
the
way,
time
yeah.
by the
If you
time the
find that picture,
pineapple,
we'll pull it up. We'll pull it back up if you find it. But yeah, I totally agree with that. I saw that earlier and I was like, yeah.
yeah,
Even though now there's pineapples
um,
in the Philippines,
they're
not
about 900 years off on that one.
I was gonna say just a few, but it looked cute, right?
Yeah, of course, of
I'm
course.
just saying it did look cute.
Overall, not bad. They got a lot
I
right.
think they did a good job. Okay,
They got a lot right.
now fact or fiction? We say, we said fact. Let us know in the comments what you think. If you're following along, we'd love to hear more from you. Now the next one, I gotta tell you, John, we both talked about this. It is so underrated. This is like it got
Ah,
like the worst,
right? It was the worst, I
like
think. The
not
biggest
even
flop.
reviews, but it was an underrated Disney movie.
Yeah,
And it's so funny because anybody that knows Disney, this is a movie that it sets the tone, and they should really just put this back to the spotlight again. And I believe they made a second one,
they really.
but
Yeah.
it was not as good as the first one.
Which
But
apparently wasn't good anyway.
we're gonna. So this is the Emperor's New Groove. That's me. I'm Crunk. So if you know anything about Crunk, like look, he's got his chef's hat on. And not only does he have his chef's hat on, if you look right here, this is his buddy the squirrel. Now, if you recall in the movie, Crunk was a junior chipmunk, everyone. And he can speak to squirrels. So just a little squick, squickity, squick. That just is hello and squirrel, everyone. But this is one that we had to bring up, and it was a toss up. And I'm sorry, everyone, but Frozen did get kicked to the curb
Yeah.
for the
They
Emperor's
nicked the cat.
New Groove. But let's do a little bit of background story on the Emperor's New Groove. This is one of my favorites, like of all time. I loved it. David Spade played Cusco the llama. John Goodman
Yeah.
played the farmer, and then, like I said, I don't know the gentleman's name who plays Krug, but downright, if you ever see him in a movie, you'll you tie it together with
Oh,
this
you know
guy.
his voice.
Like
You know.
he's a great voice actor. I'm not sure who played her. She was a creepy, creepy woman. The
Oh, she is.
entire movie. Am I right, John?
Oh yeah. I don't
Like
know. I mean, she looks like a bug. It's not even human,
like a
right?
beetle. Yeah, like a
You know, like,
beetle mixed. Like I don't. Is that her hair or is like I don't even know what's going on. But let's get to it. The background story. So loosely adapted from the classic Hans Christian Andersen folktale, The Emperor's New Clothes. Now, where? This is Inca Empire in Peru. So if you remember that too, they were on the hills of Peru.
right.
So sometime between 13 and 1500, pre-contact with Europe. So 1532. Now, the names and imagery mingle elements of the Incan culture, where I would say, with elements from Inca Peruvian cultures and non-Incan cultures of Central and South America.
Yeah, a lot of
There's a
blending.
lot going on. I was going to say there's a lot going on. So Cusco's name is similar to Cusco, the Peruvian city considered the capital of the Inca Empire. And that was his name, Pacha. I forgot it. So Pacha's name is drawn from Pacha Chutec, considered the most important ruler of the Incan Empire and a historical figure. Now, where does ag fit into all this? I always say, John, it's so crazy because remember the emperor was trying to build his water park or his vacation.
Yeah, Cuscotopia.
Cuscotopia on these hills. I don't even know how they lived on these hills too. That was so
Machu Picchu.
That was so fiction, man. Like, do you remember when they were drawing the lines of the map and they had to walk over the hills? But let's talk about ag. The Inca Empire controlled 4 climate zones, and consequently, their agriculture was diverse. Ancient Andean people were largely vegetarian, supplementing their diet with camelid, llamas, alpaca, meat, seafood if they could. The Incas developed a huge farming apparatus where crops and herds were commandeered from conquered peoples, and the people themselves were periodically required to work on state-owned farms. Man, it sounds like our Hawaii episodes that we talked about.
A little bit, yeah. Not a lot of meat again, so that's
right.
They just don't have meat there.
No,
I mean,
but it sounds like they're all working for the state-owned farms, though, too, all owned. So
yeah, very communal.
The Incas placed great emphasis on strong ag, right? Constructing thousands of storage of silos in every major center of their empire, and along with their extensive road system. Mm-hmm. Not in the movie. Not in the movie. They didn't have a road system.
No, they had to walk up that whole thing, right?
Remember?
The whole mountain.
They had to walk through the forest. That's where they met the squirrel, the talking llama. Like, that's where it all happened. So now let's go out of this, because this is some of the funniest stuff, and I'm telling you, in this movie was, one, the restaurant scene. If you remember that, John, let's pull that.
We can start with the restaurant scene, because that
oh my gosh, that was one of the funniest parts, and I might let you
need to let listeners YouTube this scene. You can YouTube this one.
Was it this one or the other one?
This particular scene. This is the restaurant scene. You can YouTube this and see it. It's like, I don't know, 2 minutes long at most. This scene, but it is funny, and it's during this scene that he's talking about specific foods, which we're going to talk about now. So Kronk is kind of roped into cooking in the kitchen because the chef kind of quits on the spot after kind of being harassed by Cusco. Because Cusco is like insulted
back and forth, remember?
Yeah, because he's insulted by the food quality or the food options. So you have Kronk in here that's starting to take over. And the dish he starts to cook up that's requested by his, I don't know if we refer to her as the boss or his overlord, whoever, whatever hierarchy that is, she wants an omelet and a spinach omelet. And so he's cooking that, and then it's going back and forth with her wanting cheese, but Cusco not wanting cheese, or might be the other way around. I can't remember, but it just keeps going back and forth. That's kind of the humor to the scene, and Kronk just gets really fed up with the changing of minds. But anyway, omelets. First of all, not produce, but let's just get that one quickly out of the way. That wasn't in this time period.
Definitely not. But I mean, yes, there was eggs, probably with chicken somewhere in there,
but not much.
I was gonna say, no one was making omelets. We're not making 4-stack omelets here. You know, let me get the chicken bacon omelet. No, that wasn't happening.
No, I mean they had. I mean omelets. First of all, just for sake of knowing, were actually, you can trace those back to ancient Persia, so totally other side of the world in all retrospect. But like you said, they like we touched on, they didn't have any really large animals for domestication, and so in turn they didn't have eggs or milk or meat or any of that stuff. So omelets, not realistic. Spinach is talked about a lot. We're going to talk about a second scene after this one, but spinach was also completely wrong as well. So spinach is actually native to Southwest Asia, so we're talking about even further now, and was actually first cultivated in Persia over 2,000 years ago, and then was used by the Chinese in the 6th century, and then finally it arrives in the Americas with the whole Columbian exchange in the 1800s. So again, totally out of.
totally out.
But in that scene, there was one right thing. It was kind of snuck in there at one point. I don't know if it was Cusco or the evil woman, but someone asked for a side of potatoes, and potatoes is very much on point, as we've talked about at length in a few of our episodes with potatoes. Um, Potatoes was like a staple of the Incan Empire. I mean, that was what fed their empire. I mean, that was what fed the armies. You could boil it down and dry it out to this chuño is what they call it. So the army would live off of this. And so that was definitely spot on.
Yeah. Now, I did find, I definitely want to try and share this because I did find if you do have a chance to check out the video, everyone, this was obviously a funny one. Where onion ring catch of the day, like
yeah, that's all right.
3 hunters wearing pants, plate of hot air, basket of grandma's breakfast, and change the bowl to a gill. Got it. Time to explain. We gotta get out of here.
that everything she said was nowhere near.
That's all 20th century.
The time period, and then he like brings it back to like, yeah, all right, 3 wet grandma's facebergs, a bucket of fries, and sour salmon of the day. Got it. None of that was in the current time period at all.
Now, I think the most famous, though, I think food that keeps getting referred to on and off throughout the movie is first captured in this scene.
Yep.
So this is where they first try to poison Cusco to get rid of him because the evil lady wants to become the ruler of Custopia or whatever
yeah
is the empire there. And in this scene, he is serving Kronk's favorite recipe and dish, which is spinach puffs. So again, unfortunately,
my spinach puffs.
Spinach again was not. Now, what is interesting though is quinoa. Okay, was the grain of the Incas. They consider it the mother grain. Okay, and that was combined with the 3 sisters, which we've kind of touched on in previous episodes as well. So with corn and squash and beans, and of course potatoes. These were all like critical to the Incan diet. And wild quinoa is actually part of the spinach family. It actually comes from the family which includes sugar, beets, beetroot, and all that. So I can sort of see maybe the connection there. They probably thought, because remember, this is what I think this came out in 2000. So quinoa, I don't think quinoa was the fad that it was yet. So I think if this came out now, maybe they could have done with quinoa, but I think spinach was a little more understood at the moment that this movie came out. So maybe that's why they went with spinach instead of the quinoa.
My spinach puffs. I'm just saying, everyone, you gotta have some of my spinach puffs. One of the other classic parts of that movie, John, we watched it earlier, which was when he starts talking to his angel and his devil, and how funny is that? That's like real world when you're talking to yourself, right? It's like you're thinking, well, should I do that? No, I shouldn't. And he's like, I'll give you 3 reasons. He's like, 1, he's like, that guy's wearing a dress. He's like, it's a robe. You know what I mean? He's like, 2, look what I can do. And he's like, I don't see how that has anything. He's like, no. He's got a point. Like, it's just
Kronk is the most open-minded person. I wish I could live the life that he, just carefree and just happy-go-lucky.
You're not a junior chipmunk. Like, you gotta be a junior chipmunk to really understand this. So, but let's keep moving forward as we move to the last and final film, which is more of a newer film.
Yes,
okay, everyone.
Definitely one that most of us will have seen, I think.
Well, and we've done a lot of coverage over the Mystic Islands. So this is one that I love as well. I've seen it probably, I'm going to say 19,444 times.
The kids love it. That's why. Same with me.
I mean, it's a great movie.
It is.
And I think it's one of the most iconic, newer movies, but which is Moana.
Yeah.
And this is obviously one that sets the tone, John. As and it's great. The songs were great. I didn't think The Rock could pull it off singing, but boy, oh boy,
He can do everything.
he, he definitely can. He definitely can do it all.
He does have the cultural tie, so there was some, validity to all of that, and perfect segue into, because again, if people don't know The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, so he is Tongan, right? Tongan ancestry. So the Moana story, the plot is original, but it takes inspiration from different Polynesian myths, namely the various stories of Maui. And so Maui, the legends of Maui vary from different Polynesian culture to others. So there's Tonga, there's Tahiti, there's Samoa.
Yep.
So every culture has a slightly different belief around the story of Maui. Now,
100%.
that all said, where do we think this happened? We believe that happened somewhere, either Tonga or Samoa, and I'm going to explain why that is. But so
one of the islands,
but specifically those two, and there's going to be a good reason for that. And we think, or there's good reason to believe that this movie was set about 2,000 years ago, which would have been sometime during the long pause. Now, what was the long pause? So the long pause, let's go before the long pause. So before the long pause, you have these Western Polynesians that were traveling the Pacific, let's call it about 3,500 years ago. And, they were explorers, like you see in the movie, with these huge canoes, just island hopping and finding these islands. And during this first wave of exploration, they arrive at what's today Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga. And then for about 2,000 years, it just stopped. They just stopped exploring. They stopped settling on new islands. No one really knows why. There's some theories out there. Some say it had to do with the change in weather, so different wind systems that prevented them from getting the winds they needed to travel further east. Some say it had to do with crazy algae blooms that was causing problems with their food sources, so they couldn't eat, and you need food when you do these big voyages. So we're not really sure why, but that's the long pause. And the reason why we believe it's during this period, the story, is because if you recall in the story of Moana, their community hasn't traveled, they said, in many years.
That's right.
Right. So this is most likely during the long pause. And we also know that if this is during the long pause, that Moana is not Hawaiian. She's not from New Zealand, because the only islands that would have been settled to a great degree at this point would have been Tonga or Samoa. So that is why we know this. So I know a lot of people confuse maybe, or just automatically assume it's Hawaii, but it is not. So that's where this is all taking place. Now, what does the agriculture look like for the Polynesians? So the Polynesians, above all, were mariners, right? They were sailing, they were sea people. But at the same time, they're also highly devoted to horticulture, producing staples of the Polynesian diet in most of the condiments and gardens and groves. And most of the plants in Polynesia were, I like to think of them as like the Swiss Army knife of food. They had to be very intentional with the crops that they were growing, because again, they were on the move. They needed crops that could be multi-purposed. So a lot of the foods that they grew were also provided materials for other purposes. So we'll get into some of what those are, but the trees of these plants were used for the canoes, for the hulls.
Yep.
The sap of the fruit was used for caulking the gaps when they built these canoes. They used leaves and fibers of these greenery of these plants for weaving and clothing and all these things. So very much not letting anything go to waste.
One thing that we always say, in the movie too, they always said the island gives us what we need. Remember that song? The island gives us what we need, everyone.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about.
I was going to say, what were some of those things, in here, and if you remember, where you are, right?
Yep.
Moana's father, Tui the Chief, talks about coconuts being a resource that is used for everything. We use each part of the coconut. That's all we need. We make our nets from the fibers. The water's sweet inside, right? We use the leaves to build fires. We cook up the meat inside. I mean, everything they consumed, they used, they made every part of it. And I'll show you a picture of, if you remember, John, this was the scene where they talked about that. Here it is.
There it is. The coconut. The beloved coconut.
The beloved coconut. And I think that that's one of them that definitely, was that, what I'm going to say, is that fact or fiction, right? Because was the coconut predominantly in this time period?
Well, yes.
I'm like, do we know? Do we not know?
But we do know. We do know this one, actually. This is not disputed.
I don't think this was disputed.
There are buts. There are buts in this, though. So the coconuts were very much present on the Polynesian Islands, and they did come with the original Polynesian explorers when they were crossing the Pacific. It was kind of grouped along with what other experts called the canoe species. So these voyagers would carry, the plants that they could in their canoes. So the other plants that were in the canoe species were taro, yams, and it worked that way because they could pack these plants in soil-filled pots as they voyaged across the sea to settle on these new islands. And the coconut was one of those critical plants that thousands of Pacific cultures used. Now, you kind of touched on the lyrics in that song where they're talking about the different ways they're using it. Now, there are some truths to that, but they're also kind of, I don't know, not as popular views of how those are used. So the coconut fibers, yes, those don't stretch or shrink in water. And so that's why they are commonly used in maritime practices. So that's why they refer to the fishnet. So that's likely.
I agree.
The coconut water was commonly used in these coconut-based cultures throughout the Polynesian islands, but not as something like sweet drink or something. It was used as medicine. So you have Western empires that would come through these islands and see the coconut and drink them. They'll be like, oh my God, this is such a sweet drink. It's used as a beverage. But no, that's not at all what the Polynesian people would have thought primarily of the coconut water as. So when they say that in the song that the coconut water is sweet inside, it's a bit of a Western influence in there. The coconut leaves. So in the song, they say that they were for lighting fires. Not so much what the Polynesian culture is associated with. It was actually used more for creation of baskets, confection of traditional dance costumes. They used the leaves to extract palm sugar from the steams when they steamed the leaves. So that has to do with the leaves. And then finally, they are, well, a lot of the song mentions the relevance of the coconut's usages, right? But a lot of it, as we saw, was just closely associated with touristic image of the area. Disney in this particular movie, in many areas, appropriates the coconut and presents it in a way that looks familiar to us, Western audiences.
Yes.
Without really shedding the true realistic representation of what the Polynesian culture saw the coconut as.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. And going back to the, if you look at even the beginning of that song, right? One thing that we did forget to mention, or I forgot to pull it up first, was the bananas.
Yes.
Do you remember that the bananas were in the beginning of that song as well? Bananas, the taro roots, also featured and mentioned in the song too.
Yes. Yep. And those are true. Bananas were definitely there. Were a crop that the Polynesians were consuming and using, as were the taro roots. So that definitely was spot on. But the coconut was like the headliner in this movie. You even had the you remember the Kakamora.
Oh, those were one of my favorite people. Those were one of my favorite. She's like, remember, she was like, what's that? And she's like,
the Kakamora.
Filthy little pirate.
They were very cute before they became like this. Now, this is unfortunately another case of cultural appropriation in the movie. So the
Wait, that's not real?
No. Well,
Oh.
it sort of is though. The Kakamora were actually they do have actually cultural roots. They're a mythical, like elf-like short-statured people of the Solomon Islands. And what the Polynesian cultures believed is that the Kakamora live on like nuts and fruits and small animals. And what makes them dangerous, because that's how they're portrayed in the movie, is that from time to time, the Kakamora are reported to feed on anyone found wandering alone. Doesn't matter what you are, if you're a kid or a hapless traveler, they'll come and attack you.
That's what these fools did.
Yeah. So they were not coconut people though. They were just short people. You know, like elves. Like if you're
so were coconut people, I swear.
that was one thing. But again, the coconut, and I think it's important to understand the cultural significance of the coconut. I think there's one particular legend tying back to Moana, because it's most likely that this was, this fictitious island that the story is based on happened in what we see as Samoa today. And there is a Samoan legend of the coconut. I think this is a short story, but I think it will give you context at why this particular crop holds so much value in these cultures. So the story goes that on the island of Savaii in Samoa, there's this story of a beautiful girl called Sina, whose beauty was just known across the entire Pacific. And the beauty, of course, eventually reaches Tuifiti, who's basically the king of Fiji, but he was way older than Sina. And he took to heart and decided that, I'll see what this fuss is all about. Let's see if this is true what everybody's saying about how beautiful she is. So he uses his mana, or his magic, right? In the Polynesian culture, they refer to magic as mana, and he transforms himself. Now, don't ask me why this. I'm sure there's probably maybe some cultural significance to this as well, but he transforms himself into an eel. Again, not the most beautiful thing you would transform yourself into, but that's what he does. And he goes into the village that Sina lives in. And when he gets to the village pool, he witnesses the beauty that is Sina, and he's just taken aback. Now, at the same moment in time, Sina looks into the pool and she sees this hideous eel staring up at her, and she cries out, "You stare at me with eyes like a demon." And very quickly, though, she notices that the eel was nice and decides, I'm going to make it my pet, like a lot of young people might do. And so years and years pass, and Tuifiti grew old. And of course, with that, his magic weakens. And he had grown so weak, he decides to reveal himself. And he explains to Sina that he was once this king of Fiji, and he had come to see her beauty, but he knew they had no chance with her due to his age. So at this point in time, he then asks Sina to plant his head in the ground. And Sina, taken with his words, respects them and follows his request and plants this eel head into the ground. And it is from that head in the ground that the coconut tree grew. And when the husk is removed from the coconut, there are 3 round marks, right, which appear like the face, they say, of the fish with 2 eyes and a mouth. So one of the marks is pierced for drinking the coconut. And so when Sina takes a drink, she is kissing the eel. And so that is the story, the Samoan legend of the coconut.
That's crazy. I think that's pretty cool, man. Right. So if we were to say Moana, fact or fiction, I would almost say like 50-50.
Yeah, I mean they have the crops. I think they have the crops pretty well, but there are some, appropriation going on in there, a little bit of twisting of the scene to cater to a certain audience. But if you look at just the raw crop, yes, they were there. They were
Yeah,
there.
it was definitely interesting. So, everyone, these are the type of things that we're gonna have fun with on our live streams this year. We're gonna talk about fact or fiction. We're gonna talk about, like John said at the beginning, we got some fun stuff coming up. I want to talk about, all types of things that we're not going to get into tonight. But John, any final thoughts? Moving in, as we start to close the episode, we did have some fun comments in there. Just obviously with Maddie being awesome starting out. We did have Amanda Rose jump in and say, I don't even think she's ready for this. I even had someone, we had Leanne Papp. I believe this is even your mom that watches, which is awesome. We love that our family watches this. But when she said, when I think of produce in Disney movies, the poisonous apple in the very first Disney movie made Snow White, come to mind. And it's so true, because produce was such a center point in all of these movies. And I say this earlier, even all of history. I mean, wars start on food, land, and currency, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's food is one of those things that everybody can relate to. And so because of that is, strongly featured. I mean, as we saw in all these movies, I mean, they're strongly featured, not necessarily always correctly, but they are there. And yeah, I think it's a fun exercise to look at how food plays a role in our cultures, in our decision makings, in our fairy tale stories, and what they represent. Like you say, with the apple is a fascinating history, which I'm sure we're going to do probably multiple episodes on, because there's just so much with apples, and there's good reasons for those as well. But yeah, maybe we'll just do a second round of Disney sometime down the road, because there's a whole lot more movies out there with interesting histories around produce, and maybe not just Disney movies, maybe other movies too. Who knows? There's no shortage.
I agree. Everyone, keep putting your comments in. We will check the comments later as we keep going. We are at our time limit today. We don't want to keep you too much this late in the night, but we will shout us out on Facebook. Check us out, The History of Fresh Produce, on Instagram, and just keep watching, keep commenting, and we'll fill in the blanks where we can. All of this, John and I are doing a ton of research on, making sure that we have something for you, I would say, to swallow and have fun with. So, Jafar,
Gronk.
This has been fun, and we thank everybody, and we'll see you on the next live stream.
Have a good night.